When any White House would hypothetically be deciding who gets to be in the room, it's not just about who gets to see and hear something firsthand, but it's about what kind of questions are they asking.
Coming up on Talking Points, the White House is changing how they select reporters in the new administration, what this means for the press pool and the future of journalism.
I know what needs to be done, and I know how to do it. Experience matters.
That was Andrew Cuomo announcing his future plans, what the former New York governor has in store for New York City.
And we have some breaking news tonight. Trump pausing all aid to Ukraine, all military aid. We will take a look at all of those developing details. Talking Points starts right now.
Andrea-Rose.
And I'm Jake Morel. Good evening and welcome into Talking Points. We open tonight with some breaking news. Just minutes ago, President Trump paused all aid to Ukraine, including weapons in transit or in Poland.
The pause comes days after a contentious White House meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
We're going to be monitoring details on that throughout the show, and we'll have much more on that later. But now we'll turn to what the Trump administration is set to do tomorrow. They're set to implement tariffs on products from Mexico, Canada, and China. President Trump plans to set 25% tariffs on imports from all of these countries, as well as a 10% tariff on Chinese goods.
Trump confirmed today that the tariffs will be taking effect. He had initially attempted to set these exact tariffs just a month ago. The top FBI and official in New York City field office, James Deheny, was forced out of his position in an email today. This comes just a month after he encouraged his employees to produce a list of more than 5,000 agents and employees who were part of the January 6 investigations. Deheny Jones joined the FBI in 2002 and held the position of assistant director in New York City in September 2024. Changes are coming to the White House as Donald Trump has announced he will now handpick reporters for the press pool. Talking Points analyst Danielle Blynn is here with more on what this change could mean for the future of the free press. Danielle?
Thanks, Andy. When the White House press pool gathered in the briefing room last week, they didn't expect to be told that a precedent over 100 years old would be trashed. The White House Correspondents Association has been in charge of selecting a rotating press pool to cover the president for over a century. The organization's mission is to fairly select who from a larger group of reporters will be rotating into the press room, Oval Office, or Air Force One. The loss of press badges for long-standing wire publications like the AP and Reuters could mean a greater loss of balanced news reporting, as they are suspected to be replaced with right-wing and alternative forms of media. The WHCA's president, Eugene Daniels, released a statement last week saying, quote, "The WHCA will never stop advocating for comprehensive access, full transparency, and the right of the American people to read, listen to, and watch reports from the White House delivered without fear or favor." Former WHCA president and Syracuse's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship's Kramer director, Margaret Taleb, says concerns about a loss of free speech are valid, with the whole First Amendment hanging in the balance.
Without those freedoms, you can't really have a free press. And without a free press, you can't have a functioning democracy. So this is a significant moment and a perilous moment. How can you have the First Amendment and peace and stability at the same time? At the same time, First Amendment is so essential to having peace and stability.
We want to welcome Danielle to the desk here. Obviously, this is a big deal right away. You mentioned it's a long-standing precedent in the White House, but what are some downstream effects that could happen if the White House really goes and bans all of these reporters?
Yeah, I mean, everything the White House does trickles down to other places, and I think a really specific instance we saw recently was everything that happened with Zelensky and Trump this week we wouldn't have seen that as the American people without those reporters being in the White House and being in the Oval Office. And I think a lot of that came from long-standing kind of neutral parties, and I think if there are those more right-wing or alternative forms that Trump is pressing for, who knows kind of what footage we would have seen from that, if any. He could have kicked those people out and they probably would have listened. I mean, so kind of all up in the air in terms of that, but I think just like the long-standing idea of like without these reporters covering these events and being on Air Force One, who knows what you're going to see coming coming in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Danielle. And, you know, also just keeping a fair and neutral opinion, very important during this time. But I think Trump's agenda is definitely pushing more against that. I also want to ask, so we know that what the White House doesn't affect just DC, but it affects the entire nation, especially with local stations and even other students who happen to be student journalists. So what is in store for students during these unprecedented times?
Yeah, I think obviously all of us as student journalists know that kind of we have to commit to having kind of fair and free processes and making sure that what we are doing is still accurate and important and like kind of all focused, but just making sure that like if there is no White House press corps, who knows what's happening further down if we want to cover politics on the local level even further. And Margaret Taleb, who's also a professor at Syracuse, kind of had something along the same lines to say about that.
Definitely.
Look, I think whether you're a student or whether you're an American or you're a working journalist, it's really vital to base your opinions, your actions, your understanding of events on fact. We can have different opinions, but not different facts. And it's really important that you're getting what you believe are facts from reliable sources.
You know, we've talked a lot in this first few months of the Trump administration about constitutionality and whether a lot of the things that they're doing are constitutional. We've seen court challenges to many of these executive orders, but people have started to bring up the notion that this may be unconstitutional, that banning reporters from the White House is a violation of the First Amendment. Are there court cases in action? Are they going to happen? Where do you see that going, Danielle?
Yeah, I think the biggest one we see is that AP case that came up a couple weeks ago now at this point is still kind of in action. A judge recently said that they are not going to immediately give back access to that AP reporter. They're going to kind of stick with saying that Trump is allowed to do that, but he noted that the judge did not think that this was going to stand on constitutionality further. He does agree that this might be too far in terms of kind of breaking those First Amendment freedoms, which I think is really important and we need to definitely keep an eye on because, I mean, like Professor Taleb said, without the free press, who knows what other kind of freedoms we're going to be losing in that First Amendment.
Danielle, thanks so much. An important story that we will continue to track. Well, turning downstate now, former New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo, who resigned in 2021 amidst a sexual harassment scandal, made major headlines on Friday when he announced that he's running for New York City mayor.
Our very own Alex Burstein joins us in studio. Alex, how do we get here?
Yeah, it's a great question. Just 4 years ago, this was Cuomo.
I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing. And therefore, that's what I'll do, because I work for you.
Cuomo's resignation came after a report found he sexually assaulted 11 women while in office. He to this day denies those allegations, and this unsurprisingly brought an abrupt end to Cuomo's political career at the time. But all 5 criminal cases against the former governor were dropped, leading to a possible opening for Cuomo to return to the public eye, and this weekend it became official.
And I believe I can help. And that is why I announced my candidacy today for mayor of New York City. I am a lifelong New Yorker, and I love New York. And I want New York to not only survive, but for New York to thrive.
A much different tone shift. Cuomo's just the latest entry into a huge field that's vying to take down incumbent Eric Adams, who's had a rocky term in the Big Apple. And the large openness may just end up benefiting Cuomo, who leads in early polls. The obvious obstacle he'll have to face is the fact that he did have to step down for those allegations, while also facing questions about his COVID-19 pandemic handling, specifically in nursing homes. But in the Empire State, 2 things speak very loudly in politics: money and name recognition. For Cuomo, he has both of those, and perhaps more than any of the other candidates. As for actual policy, he's sticking to the middle. While other candidates have already begun to attack Cuomo's addition into the race, he's stuck to points about rebuilding the police department and stopping crime. The primary is set for June 24th with ranked choice voting. We'll have any updates you need right here on Talking Points, but for now, back to you guys at the desk.
Alex, thank you. When we return, immigration crackdowns remain at the top of Trump's agenda. More updates on everything he's done when we come back.
Jason. Let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner.
Go.
Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the family. I thought you were on my team.
Rolling.
Sound is speeding.
Can you slow that down, please? This is 28-1.
28-1.
Welcome back into Talking Points. President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's Oval Office meeting on Friday turned sideways after the two leaders began a shouting match. Here to discuss the fallout from the meeting and possibly why President Trump has decided to stop sending military aid to Ukraine is Ethan Kraut. Ethan?
Thanks, Andy. The scenes from the Oval Office were nothing short of shocking. What Zelensky had hoped was a chance to show the world America had Ukraine's back quickly turned into a nightmare.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
The confrontation leaves Ukraine fearing it may have lost the support of its most powerful backer. The meeting was cut short, and the press conference that was scheduled for afterwards was also abruptly canceled. The signing of the mineral rights deal, the reason for Zelensky's visit, was also cut. The deal was supposed to be a path to continue talks between the two countries and give Trump a reason to continue supporting Ukraine. Without the deal, though, what comes next seems to be a big question mark, especially with aid being paused today. What is clear, though, was Russia was the biggest winner of the feud. Former Russian president and Putin ally Dmitry Medvedev took to X after the meeting saying, quote, "The insolent pig finally got a proper slapdown in the Oval Office, and Donald Trump is right. The Kyiv regime is gambling with World War III," end quote. Russia has been advancing on the battlefield, and just in the past few minutes, Trump announced that he'll be ending all military aid to Ukraine. Guys?
So Ethan, how has the rest of Europe reacted to this meeting thus far?
Over the weekend, Zelensky met with many European leaders in London who gathered. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer outlined a potential new plan of supporting Ukraine. He said the deal must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security. He said the UK is ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air to support the deal. He did say the deal would need U.S. support. However, he talked to President Trump over the weekend, and he said that if he did not think there was a chance of getting this deal done, he wouldn't be behind this.
And Ethan, how are American politicians right here at home reacting to this meeting?
Yeah, like many things in politics today, it was very divided. Republicans, most of them at least, jumped to Trump's support after the meeting, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in saying Zelensky chose to let things go into a downward spiral on worldwide television. Senator Lindsey Graham said he was never more proud of Trump, adding, "I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again." And Senator Bill Haggerty said the U.S. will no longer be taken for granted, adding, "Thank you, Mr. President." Now, Democrats and Trump's critics obviously took a different side, saying Trump was helping Putin. Senator Chuck Schumer said Trump and Vance are doing Putin's dirty work. Senator Elizabeth Warren said Donald Trump is treating the destruction of a democracy as a political show. It's shameful and dangerous. And former Representative Liz Cheney, if you remember, who was ousted from the Republican Party after criticizing Trump after the 2020 election, said, quote, "History will remember this day when an American president and vice president abandoned all we stand for," end quote. So obviously a bit of a divide in how the two parties are reacting to this, guys.
Thank you, Ethan. The Trump administration is continuing its immigration crackdown. Talking Points analyst Megan Acker is here in studio with updates. Megan?
Good evening, Andy. Citizenship and Immigration Services is rolling out a new registry for immigrants lacking permanent legal status. A memo was released last week calling for the registration and fingerprinting of all eligible immigrants ages 14 or older. Children younger than 14 must be registered by their parents. The memo also stipulates that registered individuals must keep evidence of their registration on their person at all times. Failure to register could result in fines or jail time. The memo coincides with a statement released from the Department of Homeland Security, stating that the organization will be instituting policy compelling self-deportation in the future. The message echoes recent messaging from DHS.
Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down.
The title of that DHS video read Warning International on its public YouTube channel. A similar video titled Warning Domestic has also been published. This comes as Immigration and Customs Enforcement has reported an increase in arrests and detainments, jumping 18% since the start of Trump's presidency. A new immigration detention center is set to be opened in Newark, New Jersey to accommodate the increase.
Megan, we want to welcome you to the desk here. In other immigration news, President Trump is now doubling down on his new gold card proposal. Let's take a look at that.
These companies can go and buy a gold card, and they can use it as a matter of recruitment. At the same time, the company is using that money to pay down debt. We're going to pay down a lot of debt with that.
So the idea is we will have a proper business. We will modify the EB-5 agreement. Christy and I are working on it together. For $5 million, they'll get a license from the Department of Commerce. Then they'll make a proper investment on the EB-5.
So Megan, we just heard, that video where $5 million gold card essentially to come into America, to have all the access to citizenship you want, but $5 million. So how might this very, very expensive registration rule and policy create a fear in immigrant communities, families? How might it create fear in them?
So I think what's particularly interesting about this gold card is that Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, did reference the EB-5 program. So that's been in existence for a while now. It's an incentive that grants green cards to would-be investors for a fee of $1.8 million. So we already have this sort of system where you are essentially paying for your immigration status. So Trump has also said that gold card holders won't have to pay taxes on income coming from outside of the United States. Experts say that it's unclear whether or not this could actually be feasible. But I think that sort of classism is something that's really sparking a fear within these local immigration communities.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about that fear and anxiety of different programs, and you talk about how the Trump administration, the first time around, added so many programs that low-income immigrants like TANF and SNAP and things like that onto the public charge rule, which of course discouraged them from taking those programs. You could kind of see it again with this gold card idea. But I want to talk about that fear and anxiety that the Trump administration seems like they're trying to induce in immigrant communities. We saw that video of DHS Secretary Kristi Noem earlier. What do you think the strategy is from the Trump administration to reaching these groups of immigrants who may not even have access to technology by posting videos and things like that?
Yeah, so the Department of Homeland Security and the Trump administration has made it very clear that their goal is to inspire self-deportation in these undocumented immigrant communities. So going back to that registry idea, that's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because if these immigrants do register, then it might set them up for an easier deportation eventually. But if they're caught unregistered, that could cause higher penalties, like I said, fines or jail time. So the idea is essentially to compel this self-deportation by frustrating these undocumented citizens, or excuse me, undocumented immigrants so greatly that it's actually easier for them to return to the countries they may be fleeing.
Megan Acker, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up after the break, what the pause of aid to Ukraine means for the larger conflict with Russia. Stay with us.
Welcome to Live from Studio B.
Welcome to another episode of Culturally and Technically Legal.
Previously on Survivor.
Welcome back to the Esports Juice Box, where we break down this week's esports news into digestible sizes for easy consumption.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Wait. Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did cats go on vacation? New York.
Welcome back into Talking Points. We return to our breaking news story tonight. The Trump administration pausing military aid and weapons to Ukraine, according to a senior administration official who said that the aid would not resume until President Trump determined that Ukraine had demonstrated a, quote, commitment to peace negotiations with Russia. So the Trump administration, Andy, obviously talking a lot about wanting to end the conflict during the campaign, clearly taking steps to do so now, maybe not in the way that we thought they would.
Right. You know, literally breaking news just now. I think, Jake, you and I were both very shocked about this, especially after this meeting with, President Trump and Zelensky. I honestly look at it kind of as like a petty move in a sense, because I don't think, of course, President Trump didn't get his way, and Zelensky had a very strong voice of opinion at that time. And I think that, while he was just trying to advocate for his country, President Trump took that as disrespect among a bunch of other things that apparently Zelensky did wrong as well. So I think, honestly, it's just a move, just really in spite of him and in spite of all, the news that's come out about this, the SNL skit. I thought that was, also something that people are talking about. So I think he really just feels like he's made a fool of right now. And in order to fight back, he pulled this move, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at our fact sheet right now really quick. As we said, a pause to Ukrainian aid. That is not a full stop. That is currently a pause. The Biden administration sent about $66 billion in aid And then once again, this is not a permanent termination of aid, but clearly, Andy, as you said, a message that he's trying to send to Zelensky. And one very common criticism of it is that it's cozying up to Russia, who invaded Ukraine, invaded a sovereign country, committed war crimes, and has been voted against by a lot of the UN. Now the U.S. in the UN General Council is starting to vote with Russia on some of these issues. The Trump administration showing that they're really serious about sort of resenting Ukraine and seeing if they can end this conflict in a way that gives Russia the land instead of that defends Ukraine's borders. And that seems to be Trump's roadmap right now, but we'll have to see how that develops. But let's move on here.
Yes, so when we come back, everyone, AI-generated videos of Trump have been circling across social media platforms, how it impacts viewers after the break.
Dad?
Just 1 minute, okay?
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Welcome back into Talking Points. President Trump has taken a new route to his social media. Recently, there have been some AI-generated images that have appeared on the White House Instagram page, followed by a recent AI-generated Gaza video of what President Trump envisions Gaza should look like during his presidency. So Jake, this is kind of crazy. You know, having a president post that they're the king, having a president post these corny messages on Valentine's Day about joking about keeping immigrants out, and then the AI generated Trump Gaza video. It caught everyone off guard, but we've never seen this from a president before.
Yeah, really interesting usage of social media, to say the absolute least. As you mentioned, a president depicting themselves as a king on social media is not something that you would ever expect to see on the presidential Instagram.
Right.
You know, of course, it seems like something that he had built up for a long time. And doing it over congestion pricing is the funniest thing ever, right? Because New York challenged that legally. We're not sure where that's going, so we're not sure if that even worked. And he kind of gave Democrats an opportunity to say, hey, we don't bow to a king, we never have, and to invoke many different state mottos that say things about not wanting tyranny. Because, of course, the United States was founded on kicking a king out. Anywho, moving on to the Gaza video too. You know, we mentioned that might be Trump's vision for Gaza, and some people who are defending him might say, oh, well, no, that's just him talking. Well, that's official White House social media.
Exactly.
Right? It's hard to imagine that he's not saying that it should be that, and that it's not a real estate project to him, which his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, very famously said to him during a 2016 debate. He said, Donald, not everything is a real estate project, but it seems like that's where he's going with everything right now.
Definitely. And you know, I don't know about you, but I personally personally didn't want to see President Trump in swim trunks or Elon Musk really like in the video whatsoever. And you saw a lot of that, I think, with the whole AI generated video and just seeing things like the gold statue of himself and other aspects, making Gaza almost seem like a resort, like Mar-a-Lago. So, you know, it's very interesting, but it's all something we have to look forward to. And yes, and that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News. I'm Andrea-Rose Oates.
And I'm Jake Morel. Have a good night.